He thought his cover was perfect. He thought I would just sit quietly at our 10-year anniversary party, smiling politely as he raised a glass with his mistress. But I'm not the kind of woman who lets her husband walk all over her in front of friends and colleagues. He invited his lover to our celebration. Fine. I brought a surprise guest who will make the entire room freeze, make her face drain of all color, and finally teach my husband what I warned you truly means. My name is Tessa Cruz. I am 32 years old, born in Arizona, and raised on the simple, searing truth that you look people directly in the eye when you tell them something vital. If you bring Savannah Lowell to our anniversary party, I will make you regret it. The words hung in the dead, conditioned air of our Rivergate, Illinois kitchen. It was Wednesday, 8 o'clock in the morning. The fluorescent light above the sink hummed, the only sound besides the faint tapping of his thumb on glass. It was the kind of aggressively normal morning where suburban marriages go to die. Not with a bang, but under the quiet hum of a stainless steel refrigerator. My voice was flat, not emotional, not hysterical. It was the voice I use at Cobalt Trial Services when I'm informing a senior attorney that their star witness has just been photographed committing perjury, or that the digital evidence they were hoping for has been irrevocably wiped. It was the voice of fact, finality. My husband, Daniel Reed, who was 37 and seemed to have forgotten the last decade, did not look up. The blue light of his phone cast a sickly, artificial glow on his face, illuminating the faint lines of annoyance around his mouth. He was scrolling, always scrolling, absorbing validation and God knows what else from a world I was no longer the center of. A sound emerged from his throat. It was not a laugh. It was the sharp, dismissive exhalation of air that passes for communication in a failing marriage. A scoff. Jesus, Tess, are you still on that? He tapped the screen one last time before finally looking up, his eyes impatient. You're being paranoid. Paranoid. The word hung there, next to my warning. He was diagnosing me. He was reducing 10 years of intimacy, 10 years of knowing his tells, his habits, his lies, down to a female malfunction. I wasn't insightful. I was sick. It's irrational jealousy, he added, tossing the phone onto the granite countertop. It landed with a heavy clack. I leaned my hips against the opposing island. The stone was cold, seeping through the thin cotton of my lounge pants, grounding me. Outside the window over the sink, the Illinois sky was a flat, miserable gray. It was the perfect backdrop for this conversation. For the moment, the foundation of our house, our life, revealed its terminal cracks. I looked at his coffee mug. It was the heavy ceramic one I bought him from an artisan market in Tucson. On our last trip to see my parents, back when I still believed my Arizona roots grounded him, reminded him of something real outside the corporate ladder he was so desperate to climb. It was full, steaming, even. He hadn't taken a single sip. He was too busy, too engaged elsewhere. A man whose coffee is getting cold while his phone is hot is a man who is already gone. He was fueled by something else this morning. Adrenaline, perhaps. The thrill of the argument he knew was coming. The one he had already prepared for. He must have sensed my stare, because he sighed, a deep, put-upon sound, and ran a hand through his carefully styled hair. Look, he said, adopting his reasonable, patient voice. It was the one he used on difficult clients, the one that dripped with condescension. I need you to be rational about this. Savannah is the vice president of operations at Northbridge Freight Solutions. She is my boss. She controls the regional promotions, and I am next in line. I need her at this party. It's about securing our future. Our future. He had the audacity to use that word, as if our future was something that could be decided over cocktails with the woman he was sleeping with. I work in evidence. My entire life, my entire career, revolves around taking the disorganized, emotional claims of human beings and finding the hard, verifiable facts buried beneath them. I support trial lawyers. I dig through discovery. I find the digital breadcrumbs, the financial inconsistencies, the patterns of behavior that people think they are clever enough to hide. I am, by nature, and by professional training, not paranoid. I am an observer. I am a processor. And I had been observing Daniel for months. "This is not a company mixer, Daniel," I said, my voice still dangerously level. "This is not a Northbridge fundraising gala. This is our 10-year wedding anniversary. It is supposed to be about us, our friends, our family. It is not a networking opportunity for your boss." He did it. The thing that made the acid rise in my throat. The thing that confirmed everything. He rolled his eyes. It was not a small movement. It was a full, theatrical, "You are so stupid" eye roll, aimed directly at me. "You just don't get it, do you?" He actually scoffed again. "You don't understand how networking functions at this level. This is how the game is played. You show them your perfect life, your successful home, your supportive wife. You make them comfortable. You're supposed to be my partner in this." He turned my valid, factual concern into a character flaw in his narrative. I was unsupportive. I was naive. I was a provincial girl from Arizona who didn't get the sophisticated games of Illinois corporate life. I, who had networked circles around hostile junior partners to get my clients the data they needed before a discovery deadline. I, who understood perfectly that networking was about building strategic relationships, not about flaunting an affair in your wife's face at a party she was supposed to be the co-host of. The insult was clean, sharp, and deeply revealing. He was telling me, in plain terms, that my role in this perfect life was to stand there and smile, a silent accessory to his ambition, even if it meant welcoming the woman he was taking to lunch at the Briar Elm on Tuesdays and texting at 11 o'clock at night. This was the moment, the click. In my line of work, we have a term for this. It's the pivot point. It's the moment a deposition stops being exploration and starts being prosecution. It's the moment the witness tells a lie so big, so fundamental, that you know you have them. You don't yell. You don't correct them. You don't wave your evidence in their face. You let them talk. You let them build their own trap, brick by brick. Daniel had just handed me the blueprints. I held his gaze. He expected tears. He expected shouting. He expected me to collapse, to throw a plate, to argue about the texts I'd seen, the late nights he blamed on inventory cycles, the sudden obsession with a new, expensive cologne I hadn't bought him. He wanted a fight. A messy, emotional fight would make him the victim. It would validate his story that I was the paranoid, irrational one. I gave him nothing. My face was a mask of calm. Inside, I was meticulously recording. I logged his dismissal. I logged his condescension. I filed away the eye roll and the weaponized corporate gaslighting. My warning. "I will make you regret it," was not an empty threat. People break threats. People forget threats in the heat of the moment. I don't make threats. I make promises. My 32 years of life, my entire Latin American upbringing in the desert sun, had taught me that honor and respect were the baseline, not a bonus. My professional life had taught me that execution was everything else. He had just insulted both. I pushed myself off the granite counter. The cold spot on my pants instantly felt warm, as if my own body heat was returning. I finally understood. I was done arguing with him. The argument was over. He had made his position clear. Now, I would organize the stage. I would not be the supportive, smiling wife in the corner of his networking event. I would not be the accessory. I would be the director. He thought this was his party. He thought he was controlling the narrative, managing his promotion, and handling his difficult wife. He had forgotten who I was. He had forgotten what I do for a living. I picked up my own empty coffee mug from the sink and placed it in the dishwasher. A small, domestic, final act. "Fine," I said. Just one word. It was quiet, almost gentle. He visibly relaxed. A smug little smile played on his lips. He thought he had won. He thought I had capitulated. "See, was that so hard?" he said, finally picking up his own now tepid coffee and taking a long drink. He winced at the temperature but swallowed it anyway. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving him to his phone and his delusions. The fight wasn't canceled. It was just being moved to a much better venue, a venue with catering, an open bar, and most importantly, witnesses. This was not a sudden fracture. A marriage of 10 years doesn't snap in a single morning over a single name. It decays. It erodes over months, hollowed out by 1,000 tiny, deliberate choices, until the whole structure is compromised, waiting for one final bit of pressure to collapse. I had been feeling the tremor for at least 5 months. It began with a scent. Daniel had always smelled the same, like the Irish Spring soap I bought in bulk at Costco, and the faint, clean musk of his deodorant. It was the smell of reliability, of home, of the man I'd married. Then, one Tuesday in late spring, he came home from work smelling sharp and complicated. It was sandalwood and something smoky, an expensive, aggressive cologne designed to announce its presence in a room. I had not bought it for him. When I asked about it, he'd shrugged. Just a sample I got, liked it. He never bought samples. He never liked cologne, but he kept wearing it. Then came the shirts. Daniel had always been a comfort-fit guy. His professional wardrobe consisted of decently pressed, standard-issue button-downs from department stores, purchased in packs of 3. Suddenly, his closet began to populate with new, tailored, slim-fit shirts in darker, richer colors. They clung to his frame, a frame he was suddenly working on with new dedication, leaving for the gym before I woke up instead of our usual evening runs. The preening was the most damning. His haircuts, once a sloppy affair every 6 or 8 weeks, became a scheduled appointment, every 2 weeks, sharp. Faded on the sides, meticulously styled on top. This was not the maintenance of a man comfortable in his marriage. This was the plumage of a man performing for a new audience, a man desperate to be seen. I am an investigator. I am trained to notice the things that are out of place, the deviations from the baseline. Daniel's baseline had been rewritten. Of course, there was the phone. The phone that had once been left casually on the kitchen counter was now a protected appendage, clutched in his hand, placed screen down on his nightstand, and angled away from me on the couch. The baseline of our digital intimacy. The casual, "Hey, can you read me that text?" was gone. One night, around 11 p.m., I was reading in bed. He was in the bathroom, and his phone, left for a moment on the charger, lit up. It was a text, not from a name, but from a label. The kind one uses for plausible deniability, S. Lowell Ops. The message itself was innocuous. Something about finalizing the numbers for the quarterly report, but the emoji that followed it was not. It was the winking face stuck in a stiff breeze emoji, the one that means, "This is our little joke." It was playful. It was inappropriate. It was 11 o'clock at night. I didn't touch the phone. I just cataloged the entry. S. Lowell. Operations. Savannah. The physical evidence arrived 2 weeks later. I was gathering our dry cleaning from his car, and a receipt fell out from between the passenger seat and the center console. A dinner receipt. From the Briar Elm. It was a dark, expensive, New American restaurant downtown that specialized in whiskey cocktails and oysters. I had mentioned wanting to go there for my last birthday. Daniel had complained it was too fussy and overpriced, and we'd gotten pizza instead. This receipt was for 2 fillets, 3 cocktails apiece, and a shared dessert. The date was a Thursday, a night he'd told me he was stuck at the depot managing a late shipment from Midland. I looked at the signature on the credit card slip. His hand, confident and clear. I felt the cliché of it first, the cold, nauseating drop in my stomach, the wife finding the receipt. It was almost insulting in its lack of originality, but the investigator in me pushed the wife aside. The investigator in me saw a data point, a critical, verifiable piece of a larger puzzle. He had not just lied about work. He had taken her to the place he refused to take me. That was when he started talking about her. It was the next phase, the socializing of the affair partner. He began to weave Savannah into our daily conversations, but not as a woman, as a concept, a mentor. "Savannah is really pushing me to mature professionally," he'd say over dinner. The dinner I cooked. "She's 42, divorced, 2 kids in high school. She's brilliant, really ambitious. She's teaching me how to think about the long-term game, not just the next quarter. He painted her as this wise, maternal figure, a safe woman, 42. He made sure to mention her age, her kids. He was building a narrative for me, for himself. See, she's not a threat. She's a colleague, a guide. But his voice when he said her name, it wasn't the tone he used for other colleagues. It was soft, admiring. It was the voice of a man who was impressed, a man who was, perhaps for the first time in his life, looking up to a woman, just not the woman he was married to. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw the receipt at his head, or demand to see his phone, or ask him who the hell S. Lowell Ops was. I went to my home office. I took a high-resolution photograph of the receipt from the Briar Elm. I noted the date and time. I logged the corresponding late shipment text he had sent me that same evening. I created a new, encrypted folder on my secure hard drive, the same kind I use for my cases at Cobalt. I titled it Read D Internal, and I saved the files. I started looking back. I cross-referenced his new haircut appointments with the days he told me he had management meetings. They matched. I noted the purchase of the cologne, correlating it with the week he first mentioned Savannah's name. This was the real betrayal. It was not one lie. It was not one dinner. It was the campaign. It was the systematic construction of a separate life, the meticulous planning, the layers of deceit, the conscious effort to manage my perception while he pursued hers. And in that process, he had changed how he saw me. I was no longer his partner, his confidant, the woman from Arizona who kept him honest. I had been demoted. I was the person at home who asked questions. I was the friction. I was the one who didn't get networking, the one who was irrational and paranoid. I was the obstacle to his new, exciting life. I was the difficult one. I understood this perfectly. He was building a case against me to justify his actions to himself. But I build cases for a living. Emotion is a wildfire. It burns hot and fast and leaves you with nothing but ash. It wins you nothing. It clouds judgment. I could not afford to be the emotional, jealous wife. That was the role he had written for me. I refused to play it, to survive this, to navigate the world he had created. I needed what I always need, a pattern of evidence, a clear, undeniable sequence of events, a file. If he was going to reduce our marriage to a game, he was going to find out, far too late, that I am extremely good at playing, and I always document my moves. I do not cry. Crying is a biological response to overwhelming emotion, and I had already walled my emotions off, brick by brick, placing them behind a barrier of cold, hard logic. Crying is what Daniel expected. It is what he wanted. A crying woman is a distracted woman. A crying woman is manageable. I, on the other hand, was methodical. My Read D internal file was growing. It had the receipt from the Briar Elm. It had the screenshots of the 11 p.m. ops texts. It had a log of his gym schedule, his haircut appointments, and the dates of his late nights, which had increased by 300% in the last quarter. But a file of evidence is useless until you have a strategy for deployment. I was an investigator, not a prosecutor. I knew my limits. I needed counsel. I did not call a divorce attorney. That was a step, but not the first one. My primary target was not yet my marriage. It was the entire edifice of lies he and Savannah had built. A divorce was a private, messy affair. I wanted a public, clean detonation. I called Alyssa Grant. Alyssa and I had been interns together at a political research firm a lifetime ago, before I went to Cobalt and she went to law school. She was now a partner in the employment law division at a boutique firm in Chicago. Alyssa was the person companies hired when they needed to fire a high-level executive without getting sued. And she was the person employees hired when they were suing a high-level executive for harassment. She was famously, terrifyingly effective, and she did not tolerate bullshit. We met at a coffee shop downtown, a sterile place with bad acoustics and worse art, chosen specifically because neither of us ever went there. "Tessa," she said, not even looking up from her phone as I sat down. She was typing furiously. You look terrible. Is this about your husband? Alyssa did not do small talk. It is, I said. But this is a professional consultation, not a personal one. I'm paying your hourly rate. That made her look up. She snapped her phone shut. Okay, you're serious. Clock's running. What's the hypothetical? I took a sip of the scalding, bitter coffee. Hypothetically, I began, my voice as level and detached as if I were presenting a new case file. You have a mid-sized logistics company. We'll call it Northbridge Freight Solutions. And you have a female vice president of operations. Let's say she's 42, ambitious, and she is, allegedly, involved in a romantic relationship with a married, male subordinate. A subordinate whose career she directly controls. Alyssa's eyes sharpened. She was already in the game. Not alleged. She's sleeping with him. Got it. Go on. This subordinate, I continued, is so emboldened by this relationship that he plans to bring his boss, the VP, as his guest to his own 10-year wedding anniversary party, a large social event at a private venue, with a photographer. His wife, my client, has explicitly warned him not to. He is refusing. I let the scenario sit there. Alyssa leaned back, crossing her arms. The faint smile on her face was not one of humor. It was the smile of a predator that has just identified its prey. Wow, she said, almost admiringly. That is next-level stupid, audacious, and incredibly arrogant. My question is this, I said, leaning forward. My client is considering documenting the event. If this relationship is exposed publicly, at this party, in front of colleagues and peers, and that documentation, say, photographs of the two of them acting inappropriately, or simply being there together against the wife's wishes, gets back to the company's C-suite or its general counsel. What happens? Alyssa didn't hesitate. Oh, she's gone. The VP is fired. The subordinate is probably gone too. But the VP is 100% terminated. Why so certain? I asked. It's a consensual relationship. Tessa, stop, she said, holding up a hand. You know better than that. This isn't about sex. It's about power. It is a catastrophic liability. In a company like Northbridge, not a Silicon Valley startup with a bros-first culture, but a traditional Midwestern logistics firm reputation is half their business. This isn't just an affair. It's a walking sexual harassment lawsuit. She started ticking points off on her fingers. One quid pro quo. Every promotion, every raise, every good project Daniel, the subordinate has gotten is now tainted. Anyone he was promoted over can claim it was due to his sexual relationship with the boss. That is a lawsuit. Too hostile work environment. Every other person in his department, male or female, who isn't sleeping with the boss, can claim they are working in a hostile environment where the only path to advancement is sexual. That is a class action lawsuit. 3, breach of fiduciary duty and corporate ethics. A VP is an officer of the company. She has a duty to protect it. By engaging in this, she has exposed the company to massive legal and financial risk. She's compromised. She's a liability. They won't even wait for a full investigation. The minute legal and HR get wind of a public scandal like that, with photographic proof, she'll be on administrative leave by 9 a.m. the next morning, and her separation agreement will be drafted by noon. She took a breath and leaned in, her voice dropping. But, Tess, they will only do that if the evidence is irrefutable. An accusation from a jealous wife can be dismissed. They'll circle the wagons, call her hysterical. You need a pattern. You need a smoking gun. What kind of pattern? I asked, testing her. The classics, she shrugged. Inadvisable after-hours communication, texts, emails, evidence of them together outside of work functions, unusual expense reports, dinners, hotels, gifts, clear signs of favoritism in his performance reviews or compensation. You need to build a case that this wasn't a one-time mistake. It's an established pattern of unethical behavior. I met her gaze. And if my client already has that, if she has the restaurant receipts for 2, The logs of the 11 p.m. texts, the timeline of his suspiciously rapid career advancement over the last 6 months. Alyssa stared at me. The professional shark disappeared, and for a second, I saw my old friend. "Oh, Tessa," she said softly. "He's an idiot. And you?" "I'm just missing the final piece," I said, my voice hardening again. "The public, witnessed event, the smoking gun that makes the pattern undeniable, the thing that forces HR to act." "Then he's not just an idiot," Alyssa said, her professional demeanor snapping back into place. "He's a fool who's about to hand you the weapon, the ammunition, and the firing range, all gift-wrapped with a bow. Just be careful. Tess, one word of warning." "What?" "Keep your own hands clean. Do not, under any circumstances, hack his phone, log into his email, or put a recording device in his car. Do not break the law. It will poison all your other evidence and get you in trouble. You document, you observe, you use what is given to you or left in plain sight. That's it. Keep it all admissible." "Understood," I said. We sat in silence for a moment. I paid the bill on the app. The legal advice was complete. As I stood up, the idea, which had been a vague, shadowy impulse, suddenly crystallized. It was as if Alyssa's legal breakdown had provided the final, necessary component. Daniel was arrogant enough to bring his mistress to our 10-year anniversary party at the Caraway House. He was using our marriage as a stage prop for his professional and personal validation. He was setting the stage, choosing the cast, but he had only cast his side of the play. If he was bringing a guest to represent his new life, I could bring one to represent the truth. I didn't need my best friend there to hold my hand. I didn't need my mother to cry with. This was not a support mission. This was a tactical operation. I needed a guest who wasn't on my side. I needed a guest who was on the side of facts. I needed someone who would, just by their very presence, invalidate Savannah Lowell's entire performance. She wanted to waltz in as the powerful, brilliant, unassailable VP. I needed to bring the one person in the world who could instantly, silently, reduce her to just a liar. I left the coffee shop with a clear map. My encrypted folder was the brief. Alyssa's advice was the legal framework. The Caraway House was the venue. Daniel was playing checkers, moving his one king all over the board. Thinking he was winning, I was playing chess, and I was done developing my pieces. It was time to position my queen. Always stay one step ahead, and always let your opponent believe you are harmless. He came home that night buzzing. It was a different energy from the tense, dismissive man at the breakfast counter. This was Daniel in showman mode, the one who had just closed a deal and was already planning the celebration. He was carrying a leather-bound folio, the kind the event planners at the Caraway House give you, embossed with the hotel's gold crest. "It's locked," he announced, tossing it onto the kitchen island. He didn't wait for me, just went straight to the bar cart and poured himself a heavy measure of whiskey. "The guest list is finalized. Coordinator just sent the proof. This is going to be perfect." He was performing, not for me, but for himself. For the imaginary audience he was already picturing. He was acting the part of the successful man of the hour, the one who commands a room. He opened the folio. The paper inside was thick, creamy, with a heavy bond weight. At the top, in an elegant, flowing script, it read, "Reed, 10-year anniversary gala." A gala, not a party. He had rebranded our marriage into a black tie event. "I finalized the seating chart," he said, tapping a diagram on the page. He was speaking quickly, excitedly. "I put your parents at the main table with us, of course, and I managed to get the CEO to RSVP. This is huge. Tess," he was trying to placate me, to buy me off with the prestige of his guest list, to show me he was being a considerate host, but I wasn't looking for my parents' names. My eyes scanned the page, moving past the section for family and landing on the one clearly titled Northbridge Colleagues, and there it was, at the very top of the list, underlined, a deliberate, defiant black line drawn with a ruler. Savannah Lowell, +1, optional. He had underlined her name. He had physically emphasized her importance, elevating her above every other guest. A flag planted firmly in the middle of our celebration. It was not a note from the coordinator. It was his handwriting. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to fill the entire room, a low, vibrating tension. The whiskey in his glass sat untouched. "Daniel," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. "We talked about this morning." He let out a sharp sigh, the showman vanishing instantly, replaced by the impatient, defensive husband. "Oh, come on. Tess, not again. I told you. It's happening, and I have a good reason. If you just listen." He picked up his glass and launched into the speech I knew he had been rehearsing all day. "She is the reason I closed the Midland contract. That deal is a 30% bonus for me, for us. She went to bat for me with corporate, personally vouched for my strategy. I have to thank her publicly. This is the perfect venue. It shows respect. It shows I'm a team player. It shows gratitude. In front of my family. At our 10-year anniversary. It's networking. Tess, my God." He took a gulp of his whiskey, the ice rattling against the glass. "She's bringing in half the executive team from the regional office. This is my one chance to get in front of them, to show them. Us. The whole package. The stable home life. The supportive wife. This is my future." I repeated the words I had used that morning, the promise I had made, letting each one land in the space between us. "I told you, Daniel, if you bring her, I will make you regret it." He laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound of contempt. "You're being ridiculous," he spat. "You are turning this into some lopsided daytime television drama. Do you even know who Savannah is? Do you have any idea?" He stepped closer, using his height to try and intimidate me, to make me feel small and irrational. "She is a 42-year-old woman. She is 5 years older than me. She has 2 teenage kids, for Christ's sake, and a messy situation with an ex-husband. What, exactly, are you jealous of her mortgage, her stress level? You're acting insane, and you're embarrassing me." It was a masterstroke of gaslighting. The defense was perfect. By painting her as a slightly tragic, older, maternal figure, he was simultaneously painting me as the crazy, insecure, ageist wife. He was using her age and her children as a shield. It was brilliant. It was also, as I knew, a lie. I let him have his moment. I let him stand there, flushed with whiskey and self-righteousness, believing his shield was solid. But he had made a critical mistake. He had given me details. Messy situation with an ex-husband. What Daniel did not know was what I had done after my consultation with Alyssa Grant. I hadn't gone back to the office. I had gone to my desk at home, opened my secure browser, and begun to pull public records. It is what I do. It is my trade. People in America, especially people in corporate positions of power, especially people going through messy domestic situations, leave a paper trail as wide as a highway. Savannah Lowell, Vice President of Operations, did not have a messy situation with an ex-husband. She was not divorced. She was separated. Her court filing, which I found in the public database for Hamilton County, Ohio, the next state over, was a petition for dissolution, filed 8 months ago, and it was currently pending. It was contested. She was still, in the eyes of the law, very much married. Her husband's name was Caleb Harlan. I looked at my husband. The picture of calm. "Her husband's name is Caleb. Isn't it Caleb Harlan? He's a civil litigator in Ohio." The blood drained from Daniel's face. His grip on the whiskey glass tightened, his knuckles turning white. He had not expected this. He had expected me to yell about the affair. Not about her legal status. "How?" His voice was a strained whisper. "How do you know that—" "It's public record. Daniel, it took me 10 minutes. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, stepping so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath. The mask of the successful husband was gone. This was pure, undiluted fear. Why are you looking up information on my boss? Are you crazy? You could get me fired. You need to stop this. Tessa, stop digging. Stop it. Right now. Got him. This was the confirmation. It wasn't just a vague fear for his job. It was the specific, targeted panic of a man whose co-conspirator's critical secret had just been exposed. He wasn't worried that I knew about him. He was terrified that I knew about her. He saw the look on my face. He saw that I wasn't backing down, that I wasn't intimidated. So he did what all weak men do when they lose control of the immediate situation. He tried to control the social narrative. He tried to poison the well. He grabbed his phone from the counter and stormed out of the kitchen, sliding the glass door to the back patio open and slamming it shut behind him. I watched him through the glass as he began to pace in the cooling night air, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of his phone. I knew exactly who he was calling. His sister, Lauren Reed. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the frantic, angry cadence of his gestures. I could read the performance. She's losing it, totally insecure. She's obsessed with Savannah. She's threatening to ruin the party. I don't know what to do with her. Lauren, she's becoming so difficult. He was building his coalition. He was creating his wings, painting me as the unstable, unhinged wife before the party even began. He was ensuring that when I reacted as he knew I would, he would have a pre-built chorus of, "We saw this coming. Poor Daniel." He was isolating me from his family, from our friends, from my own party. I turned away from the window. He could have his sister. He could have his colleagues. He could have his imaginary social victory. Because he had just confirmed my entire plan. This was the moment. The decision was no longer a vague, vengeful idea. It was a tactical certainty. My surprise guest would be Caleb Harlan. Daniel wanted to perform. He wanted to stand up in a room full of people at the Caraway House and play the role of the successful, brilliant man being honored by his powerful, adoring boss. He wanted Savannah to be the prize, the symbol of his arrival. He forgot that in every story, there are other characters waiting in the wings. I would bring the one man whose very existence stripped Savannah of her power, the one man who, just by walking through the door, would turn her from brilliant, untouchable VP into adulterous, lying wife. The one man she absolutely, under no circumstances, wanted to see while she was wearing a cocktail dress and flirting with her married subordinate. I went to my home office and closed the door, shutting out the sound of my husband's frantic pacing. I sat at my desk. I bypassed social media, too messy, too public. I already had Caleb Harlan's name and his state from the court filings. I went to the Ohio State Bar Association directory. I typed in his name. There he was, Caleb M. Harlan, civil litigator. I found his firm. I found his professional biography, his direct office line, and his email address. I would call him in the morning. I made the call the next morning. I did not use my work phone. I did not use my cell. I used a simple, prepaid burner phone I keep in my desk for contacting uncooperative or high-risk witnesses. I sat in my home office, the door locked, the encrypted READ-D internal file open on my monitor. I dialed the direct office line for Caleb M. Harlan, attorney at law, as listed on the Ohio State Bar Association directory. It rang 3 times, then clicked. "Harlan," a voice said. It was deep, curt, and impatient. "Mr. Harlan, my name is Tessa Cruz." I spoke into the receiver, my voice clear and measured. "I am the wife of the man that your wife, Savannah, is currently clinging to." There was complete silence on the other end of the line. It stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. I could hear the faint sound of him breathing, the ambient noise of a busy law office in the background. He was deciding what kind of call this was. "Listen, lady," he finally said, his voice flat and dismissive. "I don't know who you are or what kind of ambulance-chasing game you're playing." "I'm not playing a game," I interrupted, my tone matching his for coldness. "And I'm not a jealous wife, so please don't treat me like one. I am a professional investigator at Cobalt Trial Services. I deal in verifiable facts. And the fact is, our spouses are having an affair." and I have the proof. That stopped him. The words investigator and proof changed the entire dynamic of the call. What proof? He asked. His voice was still wary, but the dismissal was gone. He was now on guard. Check your email, I said. The one listed on your firm's website. I have just sent you an encrypted file. The password is Northbridge, all lowercase. I heard the rapid, sharp tapping of a keyboard. I heard a mouse click. I'm opening it, he said. You will see 3 JPEG files. I narrated, as if presenting evidence in a deposition. File 1 is a photograph, time-stamped 3 weeks ago, of your wife and my husband, Daniel Reed, having an intimate dinner at a restaurant in Rivergate called the Briar Elm. You will note the time is 9:30 p.m. My husband told me he was at a depot managing a late shipment. I let him absorb it. The photo was clear, taken from across the street. Them, heads bent close together over a small table, a bottle of wine, his hand covering hers. File 2, I continued, is dated 2 weeks ago, 11:06 p.m. on a Tuesday. That is your wife and my husband leaving a cocktail lounge downtown. He told me he was at a company mixer that ended at 9. File 3 is from last Saturday morning, 7:15 a.m. That is his car, and her car parked next to each other in a secluded corner of the parking garage attached to her office building. They were not there for a meeting. Mr. Harlan. The silence on the line was heavier now, freighted with the weight of processed, undeniable truth. I have more, I said quietly. Receipts, text logs, but I believe this establishes the baseline. I waited. I let him go through the stages: the denial, the anger, the cold, sick realization. I heard him take a long, shaky breath and then let it out in a heavy sigh. His voice was different, thinner. The litigator was gone, and the husband was there. I thought she was just busy. She's always at conferences, in Denver, finalizing budgets. She is busy, I said. She's busy committing a massive breach of corporate ethics. I've reviewed your public court filings. Mr. Harlan, your dissolution is pending. It's not finalized. Savannah is still your legal wife. Yes, he said, his voice hardening again. It's contested. Which means, I pressed on, that she, a vice president at Northbridge Freight, is currently engaged in a romantic relationship with her married, male subordinate, a subordinate whose career she directly controls. She has fast-tracked his promotions. She has approved raises for him well outside the standard cost of living adjustment. This is a catastrophic liability for her, for your divorce proceedings, and for my husband. I could almost hear him connecting the dots, his legal mind taking over, processing the implications. Now, I said, I come to my proposal. My husband, in his arrogance, is insisting on bringing Savannah to our 10-year anniversary party, this weekend, at a hotel. He is planning to thank her, publicly. He is turning our marriage into a stage to legitimize their affair, and I am not going to let that happen. What do you want from me? He asked. Do you want me to call her, confront her? Do you want my lawyer to send a letter? No, I said, sharp and immediate. That would warn them. That would give them time to circle the wagons, to build a new narrative. I don't want them warned. I want them seen. I paused, letting the next sentence land. I want you to come to the party. What? I am inviting you. Mr. Harlan, I am inviting you to fly to Rivergate, Illinois, this Saturday. You will not come as the angry husband. You will not cause a scene. You will not say a word to either of them until I give the signal. You will simply be my guest, my +1, and you will arrive at the precise moment they are feeling the most comfortable, the most triumphant. The rest, I will handle. He was quiet, but I knew he was thinking, visualizing it. This is, he began. It's a tactical maneuver, I said, and I believe you're the only one who can execute it. He was silent for another 30 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was pure steel. The husband was gone. The litigator was back. I am a civil litigator. Ms. Cruz, I specialize in breach of contract and corporate malfeasance. I understand optics, I understand leverage, and I understand, very well, the value of an in-person deposition. This was the golden detail. This was better than I could have hoped. The sheer disruptive power of a civil litigator appearing in the middle of a corporate VP's illicit rendezvous was magnificent. Then you understand the play, I said. I do, he said. When and where? Saturday night, 8 p.m., the Caraway House in Rivergate. It's black tie optional. A dark suit will be fine. I have a client meeting in Cleveland on Friday, but I can fly into O'Hare on Saturday afternoon, he said. All business. What's the cover story? Simple. You are an old friend of mine from my undergraduate days at the University of Arizona. We reconnected recently. You were in town for business and I insisted you join me. No one will question it. And when I'm there, you will be polite, charming, and you will stay by my side. I will handle all introductions. Agreed, he said. One more thing. I am sending you a second file. Password is anniversary. It contains redacted documentation, screenshots of text messages between Daniel and Savannah, non-violative, things he left open on his laptop. It also contains copies of receipts from our joint bank account for flowers, hotel rooms, and gifts I did not authorize. It is for your records, and for your own divorce case, should you find it useful. You've been thorough. There was a note of grim respect in his voice. I am always thorough. Mr. Harlan, I have to be. There was one last pause. It was the most important one. Ms. Cruz, Tessa, he said, and the formality dropped, replaced by a somber, human weight. You need to be absolutely certain. If you do this, if we do this, it's over. There is no coming back. You will not get to reconcile with your husband. This is the end. You understand that, don't you? I looked at the framed photo on my desk. The smiling, happy couple from a decade ago. They were strangers. The man in that picture would never have done this. The woman in that picture would never have had to. I don't want to go back, Caleb, I said, using his name for the first time. He made his choice. I'm just making mine. I don't want to yell. I don't want to cry. I just want everyone to see the truth, all at the same time. Understood, he said. Send me the file. I'll see you on Saturday. He hung up. I closed the encrypted folder. I powered down the burner phone. The plan was in motion. The guest list was finally complete. The final days leading up to the party were a symphony of his arrogance. Our house, which had become a cold, silent stage for our failing marriage, was suddenly filled with the frantic, joyful energy of his preparations. Daniel was not just hosting. He was producing. He was drunk on the details. He spent hours on the phone with the event coordinator at the Caraway House, debating the specific shade of gold for the charger plates. It must be a warm gold, not that tacky yellow, I heard him insist. Pacing the kitchen, the theme was white and gold, white roses, white lilies, gold leaf accents on the menus. It was the aesthetic of a man who believed he was royalty, a man building a monument to his own success. He hired a photographer, a high-end one from Chicago who specialized in candid shots. I want every moment captured. Tess, he beamed, as if this were good news. This isn't just a party. It's a milestone. We need to document it, I agreed. Documentation was exactly what I had in mind. He was acting like a successful, single man planning his own victory gala. I was merely a prop he had to manage. He was so consumed by his own performance, so blinded by the spotlight he was building for himself, that he became careless. He left the event folio open on his study desk. I found it on Thursday night. While he was at the gym, the heavy cream-colored pages were open to the final seating chart. It was a diagram of his new world order, table 1, the head table, a large round table at the front of the room. I saw his name. Daniel Reed, at the center, and there, in the seat of honor to his immediate right, the seat reserved for the wife, the partner. The co-host was her name. Savannah Lowell, I scanned the rest of the table: his CEO, his sister, Lauren, a few high-level Northbridge executives. I searched for my own name. It was not at the head table. I found it at table 3. Tessa Cruz. I was wedged between a mid-level accountant I'd met twice and one of his distant cousins known for drinking too much. I was not just sidelined, I was publicly relegated, buried in the middle of the room, a clear visual message to anyone who cared to look. My relegation was so blatant, it was almost an act of violence. My hand was perfectly steady. I did not feel anger. I felt a cold, sharp click of confirmation. I took out my phone. I angled the light to avoid a glare. I took 3 high-resolution photographs of the seating chart diagram. I immediately uploaded them to the Read D internal folder, labeling the file Exhibit a Seating Chart. He came home later, smelling of his new sandalwood cologne, not of sweat from the gym. He was reviewing the final menu proof from the caterer. "I made one last adjustment," he said, not looking up from the page. "I added a raw bar, oysters on the half-shell, a little touch of class." The air left my lungs. For our first anniversary, years ago, when we were still struggling and happy, we had gone to a seafood shack on the coast during a vacation. I had tried an oyster. I had an allergic reaction, not a small one. My throat had closed. My face had swollen. We had spent our first anniversary in a local emergency room. It was the night I learned I was lethally allergic to shellfish. He had held my hand. He had been terrified. He had promised he would never forget. And now, 10 years later, he was ordering them for our party. "Daniel," I said, my voice empty, "I'm allergic to oysters." He finally looked up, his eyes annoyed, as if I had just pointed out a typo. "Right. Well, just don't eat them. Tess, it's for the other guests. Savannah mentioned she adores them." There it was. It was not a lapse in memory. It was a statement, a deliberate, calculated act of cruelty. Her pleasure was so important that my safety, my very presence, was irrelevant. He was not just accommodating his mistress, he was actively poisoning his wife's environment to please her. The next day, the social campaign he had started with his sister escalated. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark, a college friend of his, a man I had hosted in my home for a dozen Thanksgivings. "Hey Tessa, just wanted to reach out. Dan sounds like he's under a crazy amount of pressure with this big party. He's really counting on it for his career. Hope you guys can present a united front. Don't let the small stuff get to you. It's a big night for him. A big night for him. Not us. Him." The narrative was set. He was the striving, stressed-out husband. I was the small stuff. I was the potential problem, the unhinged wife who might make a scene and ruin his big moment. He had successfully painted me as the saboteur, while he was the one actively sabotaging our entire life. I took a screenshot of the text. Exhibit B, Social Gaslighting. It went into the folder. While he was confirming flower deliveries, I was confirming my own logistics. I updated my encrypted folder with the restaurant's signage from their website, the signed copy of the event contract for the Caraway House, and the email confirmations for the photographer. I was building the case file that Alyssa Grant would need. I checked my burner phone. A single text from Caleb Harlan, Flight 712. Lands O'Hare, 6:32 p.m. I opened the Uber app. I scheduled a black car. Prepaid. For precisely 6:30 p.m., the pickup location was Terminal 3. The destination was the Caraway House. I added a note for the driver. "Passenger is Caleb Harlan. Please have a sign. Do not call. Only text." I wanted zero possibility of failure. He would arrive just as the cocktail hour was in full swing. On Friday, the day before the party, an email from Alyssa Grant landed in my inbox. The subject line was simply, "Draft." I opened it. It was a work of art. A perfectly composed, lethally precise template. To Ethics Northbridgefs.com. LegalNorthbridgefs.com. CEO's Assistant's Email. Subject: Urgent. Formal complaint. Regarding breach of ethics and fiduciary duty. VP Savannah Lowell. The body of the email was a cold, legal masterpiece. referencing specific clauses of the Northbridge Employee Handbook on fraternization, quid pro quo, and conflicts of interest. It laid out the legal liability, the risk of a hostile work environment lawsuit, and the damage to shareholder confidence. It was a missile, ready and aimed. All it needed was for me to attach my files and press send. That evening, I was in our bedroom, looking at my closet. When Daniel came in, he was in a good mood, the final details locked. "What are you planning on wearing?" he asked, straightening his own new silk tie in the mirror. I hadn't decided. I lied. "You should wear that green silk dress," he said, gesturing vaguely. "The high-necked one. It's appropriate." The hunter green dress, demure, conservative, a dress that would make me fade into the background, a silent, supportive prop. It was the perfect costume for the good wife. He wanted to ensure I didn't compete with his real guest of honor. "Okay," I said, my voice soft. "That's a good idea." He smiled, satisfied. He thought he had managed me. He thought he had contained the threat. I pulled the dress from the closet. The silk felt cool and heavy in my hands. It was the perfect camouflage. Tomorrow night, they would see the wife, standing there in her modest green dress, and they would see the mistress, who I was certain would be wearing something loud, something celebratory. The contrast would be stark. It would be another piece of evidence. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, holding the dress against me. My mind was quiet. The emotional storm had passed months ago. Now, there was only the calm, clear focus of the countdown. I remembered my promise to him in the kitchen. "If you bring her, I will make you regret it." He thought it was a threat. He thought it was the weak, emotional lashing out of a jealous woman. He had forgotten what I do for a monitor. I don't make threats. I present facts. Tomorrow night was not a party. It was not a gala. It was not a celebration of our 10 years. It was a field operation. It was an evidence scene. And I was, finally, ready to collect. The private ballroom at the Caraway House was suffocating in its perfection. It was a sea of white and gold, bathed in the expensive buttery light of 3 chandeliers. Dozens of white roses, flown in from God knows where, were dying slowly in tall glass vases, their scent thick and cloying. This was not a room for a 10-year marriage. It was a room for a coronation. The guests trickled in, and with each new arrival, I felt more like an outsider in my own life. This was not our crowd. This was his. I saw his sister, Lauren Reed, arrive, air-kissing him, her eyes flicking to me for half a second with a look of practiced pity. She was in on the narrative. I was the difficult one. I saw Mark from the gym, the one who had texted me, clap Daniel on the back and pointedly ignore my greeting. I saw a flood of Northbridge colleagues, all of them dressed in sharp suits and cocktail dresses, all of them looking at Daniel with a new, impressed deference. He was the man with the direct line to the VP. Not a single person in that room, save for the catering staff, was there for me. I was a ghost at my own party, haunting the perimeter in my demure, high-necked green dress. I nursed a club soda with lime. I needed my mind clear and watched my husband work the room. He was a different person. He was expansive, charming, his voice booming with a confidence I hadn't heard since his last major promotion. He was performing for an audience that was not yet here. As the cocktail hour waned, a soft chime invited us to find our seats. I let the crowd move ahead, then made my way to the seating display. It was an obscenely large, gilt-framed mirror with all the names written in perfect, looping calligraphy. I found his table, Table 1, Daniel Reed, and to his right, in the same elegant script, Savannah Lowell. I then found my own, Table 3, Tessa Cruz, just as the diagram had promised. I was seated between the sweaty-palmed accountant and the drunken cousin. My banishment was official, calligraphed in gold ink, and then the room shifted. The ambient chatter quieted for a beat. Daniel, who had been laughing at the head table, suddenly stood up. His gaze was locked on the ballroom entrance. She was here. Savannah Lowell made her entrance as if she had been cued by a stage manager. She had not opted for appropriate. She was wearing a floor-length, backless dress in the deepest shade of wine red. It was a dress designed to be looked at, a dress that clung to every curve, a scarlet letter announcing her own importance. Her makeup was heavy, her hair swept up in a complicated, glamorous style. She walked in not as a guest, but as the guest of honor, the star of the show, blissfully, arrogantly unaware that she was walking into a trap. Daniel moved to her. He didn't just walk. He was drawn. He met her at the door, taking her thin cashmere wrap, his fingers brushing hers. He looked at her. It was the look. It was the look I hadn't seen in 7 years. The one he used to give me when I'd walk into a room. It was a look of hunger, admiration, and worst of all, ownership. It was the look of a man who could not believe his luck. He guided her into the room, his hand placed possessively on the small of her backless dress. He brought her not to the bar, not to her seat, but directly to me, where I stood by the unused dessert table. He was beaming, his face flushed with triumph. He was so proud. He was holding his wife and his mistress in the same space, and he was winning. "Tessa, darling," he said, using a pet name he hadn't used in months. "Look who's here." Savannah smiled at me. It was a tight, professional, corporate smile, the smile of a woman assessing a subordinate's spouse. "Savannah," Daniel said, his voice booming for the room to hear, "I want you to formally meet my wife, Tessa. Tessa. This is Savannah Lowell, the woman I was telling you about, the person who truly made this entire successful year possible for me. It was the most civilized, brutal, public humiliation. He was thanking her for his success in front of his wife. He was giving me, my role, our decade of support, to her. Right in front of my face. I looked at Savannah. I saw the way she was sizing me up in my drab green dress. She saw a plain, simple, harmless woman. She saw exactly what Daniel had told her she would see, the difficult but supportive little wife. So I smiled. I extended my hand, my own smile bright, warm, and utterly fake. "Savannah," I said, my voice as smooth as the silk on my dress. "It is so wonderful to finally meet you. Daniel has spoken so highly of you. We are just thrilled you could make it. Truly." I nailed the performance. My smile was so genuine, my tone so welcoming, that I saw the tension instantly leave her shoulders. She had been expecting, perhaps, a cold shoulder, a little jealousy. I gave her the opposite. I gave her perfect, unsuspecting adoration. She smiled back, patronizing and relieved. "It's a beautiful party, Tessa," she said, her voice dripping with the confidence of a woman who knows she holds all the cards. "You've done a wonderful job. You've done a wonderful job, as if I were the help." "We just try our best," I said, still smiling. The photographer, the one Daniel had hired, suddenly appeared. "Mr. Reed, Ms. Lowell, a photo." "Absolutely," Daniel boomed. He pulled Savannah closer. I stepped back, deliberately, politely, fading out of the frame. The photographer didn't even notice me leave. His lens was focused entirely on them. Daniel, flushed and triumphant. Savannah, in her blood-red dress, smiling like the lady of the manor. Flash, flash, flash. He was capturing it all. Exhibit C, Exhibit D, Exhibit E. I watched them pose. My husband and his boss, at my anniversary party. He was documenting his own downfall. One $800 an hour shot at a time. I made a mental note to get the photographer's card before the night was over. "Let's get you to the table," Daniel said to her, his hand never leaving her back. I watched them walk to table 1. I watched him pull out her chair. The one to his right. I turned, and with a slow, calm dignity, I walked to table 3. I sat down next to the accountant, who was already sweating and smelled faintly of gin. The hum of chatter resumed. Wine was poured. Salads were served. The first toasts were about to begin. The room was warm, comfortable, and celebratory. And in my lap, beneath the table, my small clutch purse vibrated. I slipped my hand inside and pulled out the phone. A single, new text message. From Caleb. I'm in the lobby. Are you ready for me? I read the text. I looked up at the head table. Daniel was leaning in close to Savannah, whispering something. She laughed, tossing her glamorous hair back. They were invincible. They were perfect. I took a sip of my water. I placed my cloth napkin on the table. I stood up. The accountant looked at me, startled. Please excuse me, I said, my voice soft and polite. I just need to use the restroom. I did not walk to the restroom. I walked past it, through the secondary set of doors, and into the grand, quiet lobby of the Caraway House. The difference in atmosphere was immediate. The ballroom was hot, loud, and smelled of perfume and white roses. The lobby was cool, silent, and smelled of marble and expensive, unscented wax. The sound of the party was a dull, rhythmic thumping behind the heavy oak doors. He was standing by the large, unlit fireplace, exactly as he'd promised. Caleb Harlan was not what I had expected. He was taller, thinner. He was wearing a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. He looked less like an avenging husband and more like a man who was about to give a very quiet, very lethal deposition. He was a picture of lawyerly calm. But I had been staring at faces for a living for a decade. I could see the tightness around his jaw and the deep, hollow pain in his eyes. This was a man who had not slept, a man who had been blindsided by the same betrayal I had. He was not here for my revenge. He was here for his own answers. He saw me, and his expression did not change. He simply inclined his head. I walked up to him, my heels clicking on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the silence. "Mr. Harlan," I said, my voice low. "Thank you for coming." "Ms. Cruz?" he replied. His voice was steady, but I noticed he was clenching and unclenching his left hand at his side. "The flight was on time. The car was efficient. You run a tight operation." "It's the only way to run one," I said. "Are you ready?" He looked past me, at the oak doors, at the source of the muffled music. He took a single, deep breath, squaring his shoulders. It was the movement of a man steeling himself to walk into a courtroom. "I am just one thing," I said, stopping him before he could move. "This is not a confrontation. Not yet. This is an introduction. You are my guest. You will let me lead. You will stay by my side, and you will just let them do the work. The rest will happen exactly as it's supposed to. Do you understand?" He met my eyes. He saw the same cold, methodical resolve in me that I saw in him. This was not a partnership of emotion. It was an alliance of fact. "Understood," he said. "Good. Then let's join the party." I turned. I did not link his arm. That would be too familiar, too staged. Instead, I simply began to walk, and he fell into step beside me, a half step behind, a perfect, polite escort. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. The wave of heat and sound hit us. The party was in full swing. A waiter was pouring champagne at the head table. The photographer was crouching by the bar, getting a new angle. Daniel's sister, Lauren, was laughing, her head thrown back, and then we stepped in. It wasn't a sudden, record-scratch silence. It was a slow, rolling wave of curiosity. I was, after all, the wife, the banished wife, and I had left the room alone, in my drab green dress. Now I was returning, not from the restroom, but from the lobby, and I was not alone. I was with a tall, the handsome, composed stranger. I saw Lauren's laugh die in her throat. I saw Mark, my husband's friend, point. I saw the heads at the mid-level tables turn, one by one, tracing the new, disruptive element in the room. And then I saw Daniel. He was at table 1, a champagne flute in his hand, in the middle of a toast. His back was to the door, but he felt the energy shift. He saw his audience, his colleagues, his CEO, look away from him and toward the entrance. His smile faltered. He turned. He saw me, and he saw Caleb. His face was a beautiful, readable map of his spiraling thoughts. First, confusion. Who was this, then? Annoyance. This was an unscheduled guest. This was not on his perfect, curated list. This was his wife, the difficult one, bringing an unknown man into his gala. It was a breach of protocol. I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. He was angry. He was about to be condescending. I did not give him the chance. I smiled. The same bright, false, welcoming smile I had given Savannah, and I began to walk, not to my loser table, but directly toward him, directly toward table 1, towing Caleb in my wake. "Daniel, darling," I called out, my voice clear and bright, slicing through the new, awkward silence. The room was now completely quiet, save for the sound of my heels. I saw Daniel's face flush with anger at my audacity. He set his champagne flute down with a sharp clink. "Tessa, what are you doing?" he hissed as I approached. I stopped right in front of him. I was now the center of the room, exactly where he had not wanted me to be. "I am so sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice projecting to the entire head table. "But I just ran into an old, dear friend of mine in the lobby, and I simply had to steal him for a moment to come and say hello. It's such a wonderful surprise." I turned, gesturing to the man beside me. "Daniel, everyone," I said, my smile widening. "I want you to meet Caleb. He's an old friend from my university days. Caleb, this is my husband, Daniel." Daniel did not extend his hand. He was staring at Caleb with open hostility, but Caleb was not looking at Daniel. His gaze had moved past my husband, past the white roses, past the untouched oyster platters. His gaze had locked on the woman in the wine-red dress, Savannah Lowell. She had been in the middle of a bite, a forkful of high-dollar salad, halfway to her painted red lips, and she froze. It was not a subtle freeze. It was a full-body, system-wide failure. The fork hung suspended in the air. The smile she had been giving Daniel shattered, not faded, but shattered, like a mirror dropped on concrete. The blood drained from her face, leaving her a sickly, pale white, her dark red lipstick suddenly garish and clownish. She was a ghost in a designer dress. Caleb did not move. He did not smile. He simply looked at her. The woman who thought she was at a conference in Denver. The woman who was still, under the law. His wife. He tilted his head, a small, professional gesture of acknowledgement, and in the dead, cold silence of that ballroom, his voice landed, perfectly calm, perfectly clear, and utterly devastating. "Hello, Savannah." He did not call her dear, he did not call her honey, he just used her name, but he said it with the quiet, terminal disappointment of a man who has just been handed the final, undeniable piece of evidence. It was the sound of a case file being closed. The silence in the room stretched for 1 second, 2, 3. It was the loudest silence I had ever heard. Every person at that table, the CEO, the executives, Daniel's sister knew, instantly, that this was not an old friend. This was something else. This was the bomb, and the timer had just hit 0. Daniel, the fool, was the only one who didn't get it. He looked from Savannah's ashen, terrified face to Caleb's cold, calm one. "What's going on?" he hissed, turning to Savannah. "Savannah, who is this?" But Savannah could not answer. She was staring at her husband as if he were an apparition. Her face was her confession, and I, the director, knew my work here was done. I had set the scene. The actors were in place. The crisis had been initiated. I turned away from the head table. I did not need to see the immediate fallout. I walked back to my seat at table 3. I sat down, smoothing the green silk of my dress over my lap. The sweaty-palmed accountant was staring at me, his mouth open, and across the room, I heard the sound, flash. The photographer, bless his professional heart, was not paralyzed. He was documenting. He had abandoned the posed, happy shots, and was now capturing the real thing. He was capturing the blood-red dress and the bone-white face. He was capturing my husband, frozen in a mask of confusion and rage. He was capturing the exact moment the entire, glittering, perfect, white and gold party turned to ash, and I, at my distant table, finally, picked up my wineglass. The curtain was up. The ballroom was no longer a party. It was a pressurized chamber. The air, once filled with laughter, was now thick and sharp, charged with the static of a public execution. The buzz was no longer chatter. It was the frantic, high-pitched hum of scandal. Whispers were erupting from every table. Who is he? Did you see her face? My God, is that her husband, Lauren Reed? Daniel's sister? Was staring, her face a mask of horrified confusion. The CEO at Table 1 had put his napkin down and was looking at Savannah with a new, cold expression. And I, at Table 3, was the picture of innocence, the abandoned wife, watching the drama unfold like everyone else, but under the cover of the white linen tablecloth. My hands were not idle. I slipped my phone from my clutch. My thumbprint unlocked it. I opened my pre-drafted email, the one Alyssa Grant had helped me prepare. My thumb moved with the detached, precise speed of a person who has done the same data entry task 1,000 times. I opened the Read D internal folder. I selected all files. Exhibit a seating chart, JPG. Exhibit B, social gaslighting. Text T, Exhibit C, photographer proof 01. JPG. Exhibit D, restaurant receipt. JPG. Exhibit a late night texts. PDF Exhibit F, joint account purchases. PDF. I attached them all. 32 files in total. I added 3 email addresses from memory. Addresses I had triple-checked. To Ethics Northbridge Fs. Com CC Legal Northbridge Fs. Com BCC CEO. Assistant Northbridge Fs. Com. My thumbs flew across the keyboard, adding a final, decisive note to the top of Alyssa's perfect template. To the Office of General Counsel and the Ethics Committee. Please accept this as a formal complaint. The events described in the attached file are not historical. They are occurring at this exact moment, Saturday, November 8th, at approximately 8:45 p.m., the attached documentation of an inappropriate relationship, quid pro quo, and corporate waste is being publicly confirmed at the Caraway House Hotel in Rivergate. At a private event, Vice President Savannah Lowell is present as the guest of her married subordinate, Daniel Reed. The entire Northbridge executive team present here, as well as a professional photographer, can serve as witnesses. I paused, then added the final, lethal sentence. Furthermore, VP Lowell is conducting this affair while still in a legally unterminated marriage to Mr. Caleb M., Harlan, Ohio bar number 079865, who is also present at this event as my personal guest. Having just arrived, I trust you will handle this matter with the appropriate urgency. Sincerely, Tessa Cruz. I hit send, the icon whirred for a half-second, and then it was gone. The missile was launched. I looked up from my lap, my face a mask of polite concern. Just as the scene at the head table reached its second act, Caleb Harlan, having delivered his devastating opening line, was now performing. Just as I had asked. He had not raised his voice. He had not moved. He simply stood there, the embodiment of a problem that could not be dismissed. He leaned forward, just enough for the rest of the silent, paralyzed head table to hear him clearly. His voice was not angry. It was inquisitive, the voice of a litigator asking a question to which he already knows the answer. "Savannah," he said, his voice cutting through the whispers. "I am just a little confused, because you told me you were at a risk management conference. In Denver, you said you were delivering the keynote." Savannah's hand, the one holding the fork, began to tremble. The fork clattered onto her plate, a sound as loud as a gunshot in the dead silence. I, she stammered, her eyes darting around. She was looking for an ally. She was looking for a way out, and her eyes landed on Daniel. It was a desperate, pleading look. "Help me. Fix this. Do something. But Daniel was paralyzed, too. He was staring at Caleb, and the pieces were finally, agonizingly, clicking into place in his slow, arrogant mind. This was not an old friend. This was not a random coincidence. This was her husband, the messy situation, the ex-husband, the divorced 42-year-old mentor. It was all a lie. He, Daniel Reed, the master of networking, had been played just as much as I had. He wasn't her partner in a sophisticated corporate affair. He was her leverage, her distraction, her boy toy. He was the idiot who had believed her, and who had just invited her angry, lawyer husband to his own anniversary party. His face, which had been flushed with triumph, was now a sickly, mottled white. He was in shock. His entire performance, his entire perfect year, collapsing in on itself. The whispers in the room were now a low, vicious roar. Lauren Reed, my sister-in-law, was whispering frantically to the man next to her, who was then whispering to his wife. The information was spreading organically, socially, from the family outward, just as I had planned. Let the rumor mill do the work. By the time the email was opened on Monday morning, the entire story would already be legend. Savannah Lowell, trapped between the man she was sleeping with and the man she was married to, did the only thing she could. She cracked. I need to take this, she sputtered, grabbing her small, beaded clutch from the table, her movements frantic, jerky. An urgent call. From the office. She stood up so quickly she nearly knocked her chair over, and she fled. She did not walk. She did not make a graceful exit. She damn near ran from the head table, her wine-red dress a blur as she pushed past a bewildered waiter, her heels catching on the carpet, and disappeared through the main doors into the lobby. It was a public, undeniable, catastrophic rout. She was a VP fleeing her own subordinates, and her husband was left standing there, watching her go. Daniel, finally snapping out of his shock, his primary instinct to protect his boss, his promotion, his Savannah kicked in. "Savannah," he called out, his voice cracking. He took a step to follow her, to go after her, to manage the crisis, and Caleb Harlan, without even looking at him, put out a single, calm hand, blocking Daniel's path. It was not an aggressive move. It was a simple, legal, physical boundary. "I wouldn't," Caleb said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. "I think it's best if she explains this to me. First." Daniel froze. He was a man of middling intelligence and physical strength, and he was being blocked by a calm, 6'2" litigator who looked like he could dismantle him in court and on the carpet. He was, for the first time, completely outmatched. I sat at table 3. I watched it all, a silent film of my own creation. My heart was pounding, a hard, fast drumbeat against my ribs. I could feel the adrenaline, a hot, sharp tingle in my fingertips, but my hand was rock steady. I picked up my full glass of Chardonnay. I raised it, just an inch, a silent toast to myself. Everything was proceeding exactly as I had documented, and then, from the lobby, it came, a new sound, piercing the stunned silence of the ballroom. A phone was ringing. It wasn't a polite, muted vibration. It was a loud, frantic, shrieking ringtone. The default Apple one, set to maximum volume. It was coming from the lobby, where Savannah had fled. It rang, and rang, and rang. It stopped. And then, 3 seconds later, it started again, shrill, insistent, and desperate. Ring, ring, ring. I smiled, a small, genuine smile, and finally took a sip of my wine. It was crisp, and cold, and perfect. The ethics department, I mused, was working late tonight. The shrill, insistent ringing from the lobby finally stopped, cut off mid-shriek. The silence that followed was heavy, dead. Every guest in the ballroom, Daniel's colleagues, his CEO, his sister, was frozen, their eyes locked on the lobby doors. They were no longer guests at a party. They were witnesses at a public hearing. The doors swung open. Savannah Lowell stumbled back in. If she had looked pale when she left, she was now translucent. Her skin was a waxy, greenish white, her eyes wide and staring. Her dark red lipstick now a horrifying, bloody smear on a corpse's face. She was clutching her small beaded bag so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like a woman who had just seen the future, and it was one of complete, total annihilation. She had clearly just been ordered to present herself for ritual execution on Monday morning. She staggered a few steps and stopped, her gaze fixed on the man who was still standing at the head table. Her husband, Caleb Harlan, had not moved. He watched her with a profound, cold sadness. He was no longer the avenger. He was simply the bearer of the final, terrible news. He spoke, his voice still quiet, but it carried across the silent room. He was not speaking to her. He was speaking to the entire, captive audience. That was, I assume, the ethics department at Northbridge, he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. I just received a copy of the email your company was sent, the one with the attachments. He looked at her, his face a mask of lawyerly calm. I will be forwarding my copy to my attorney in Ohio. You should probably contact yours. The entire room heard it. Email, attachments, attorney, ethics. This was not a domestic dispute. This was a corporate implosion. This was serious. This was, as I had planned, a career-ending event, and it was at that moment, the final, undeniable confirmation of his own ruin, that my husband, Daniel Reed, finally turned his attention away from his collapsing mistress and his new, terrifying enemy, and looked at me. He stared across the room, his eyes finding mine at the distant, irrelevant table 3. His face was no longer pale with shock. It was a deep, mottled, dangerous red, the red of pure, undiluted, humiliated rage. He began to walk. He didn't stride. He stomped. He crossed the ballroom floor, pushing past the table of his stunned colleagues. His eyes locked on mine. The entire room watched him. He stopped directly in front of my table, looming over me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The sweaty-palmed accountant next to me literally shrank back in his chair. "You," Daniel whispered, his voice a low, strangled growl. "You did this. What did you do?" I did not flinch. I did not shrink. I did not lower my gaze. I looked up at the man I had spent a decade of my life with, the man who had just tried to publicly erase me, and I spoke the truth. "I did exactly what I said I would do," I said, my voice clear and cold, with no tremble, no fear. "I told you, this morning, in our kitchen, I told you that if you brought your mistress to our 10-year anniversary party, I would make you regret it. I told you I would not be the only person humiliated tonight, and I always keep my promises. She's insane." Daniel's sister, Lauren, suddenly shrieked from across the room. Finally finding her voice, she stood up, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Daniel, she's unhinged. This is too far. Tessa, this is cruel. You're cruel." Her accusation hung in the air, the first line of defense for their shattered family. But a voice, a calm, authoritative one, cut her off. "She is not," Caleb Harlan said. He had not moved from the head table. He was speaking to the entire room. "For the record, I was not contacted by a cruel or unhinged woman. I was contacted by a professional investigator who presented me with a folder of verifiable, conclusive evidence of my wife's affair. His wife did not lie. His wife did not invent this. She just collected the receipts." That one sentence. She just collected the receipts. Shut Lauren Reed down completely. Savannah, who had been frozen by the door, saw her last, tiny window of opportunity. She saw the CEO watching. She saw her entire career evaporating. She had to try. "This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "It's not. Daniel and I, it's a close working relationship. He's a protege. I'm mentoring him. This is just a jealous wife twisting.
The card.
Twisting what? I said, my voice cutting across hers. I reached into my clutch. I took out the folded, glossy photograph I had printed this morning, the one I had taken of the seating chart. I stood up. I walked past my husband, back to the head table. I looked at the CEO, at the other executives, at Daniel's sister, and then I threw the photograph onto the middle of the table, right next to the dying white roses. Twisting this, I asked, is it a close working relationship that gets you the seat of honor? The wife's seat? At his anniversary party? Is it mentoring that gets my name? Tessa Cruz, banished to table 3 next to a man I don't know, while you're seated at Daniel's right hand. I pointed at the raw bar. Is it mentoring that means he orders platters of oysters that his wife is deathly allergic to, simply because you adore them? I turned, and I faced the entire silent room. I don't need to scream, I said, my voice resonating with a power I had forgotten I had. I don't need to throw things. I didn't need to cry or beg. I just needed you all to see the truth, all at once. I needed you to see how this man, my husband, and this woman, his boss, treat a legal wife in public, at her own anniversary, in front of her entire life. This is what they did. This is who they are. I looked back at Daniel. He was staring at the seating chart on the table. He was staring at the oyster platter. He was staring at his own documented, arrogant cruelty. He had no defense. He had no lies left. The evidence was absolute. He understood, finally, that he was finished. His promotion, his reputation, his perfect year, it was all gone. His face contorted, and the final, desperate words of a defeated man ripped out of his throat. You, he roared, lunging toward me. You ruined me. You will not get a cent. You're destroying my career. I did not step back. I held my ground. I didn't destroy your career, Daniel, I said, my voice dropping, low and final. You did. You set your entire life on fire, all for her. I looked at the white roses, at the golden plates, at the wreckage of our marriage. I just turned on the light so everyone could see it burn. A heavy funereal silence fell over the room. It was over. The CEO was the first to move. He stood up, placed his white napkin neatly on his chair, and without a single word to Daniel, he walked out of the ballroom. His assistant, and the other executives, scrambled to follow him. The party was over. The guests, Daniel's friends, his family, began to stand, avoiding eye contact, gathering their things, a defeated army retreating from a lost battlefield. Savannah Lowell, a ghost in a red dress, was still standing by the door. Caleb walked toward her. "We're leaving," he said. It was not a request. He gestured with his chin. "Get your coat. We'll discuss the terms of this in the car." She looked at him, her eyes dead, and she followed, like a prisoner. She followed her husband out of the ballroom, her career and her affair in ashes behind her. The room emptied in under 3 minutes. Soon, it was just him, Daniel, standing alone at the head table, the one he had fought so hard for. He was surrounded by dead white roses, by plates of uneaten food, by the warm, melted puddles of gold-themed candles, and by the echoing silence of his own ambition. I watched him for a moment, the man I had loved, the man who had, in the end, been so easy to defeat. I turned my back on him. I walked out of the ballroom, past the marble fireplace, and into the cool, clean night air of the rest of my life. I did not look back. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.